Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Dave. Dave, would you like to introduce yourself and your business to the community?
Hi there, I'm David Howell. I'm the owner of Nexus Publishing. It's a copywriting and business communication business. I write everything from press releases all the way through to in-depth reports for various types of businesses. Tend to specialize in the business and tech space. That's my thing. I can write about other things if people want me to, but business and tech, it's been my sort of bag for well over sort of 3 decades.
Oh wow! And how did you get into the business? Where did that come from?
I'd always wanted to write, right from an early age. I kind of knew I wanted to do something in that space. But when I was younger, I just thought, well, writing was fiction. You had to write a novel. And someone just mentioned, well, actually, no, there's journalism, there's non-fiction, there's business writing and all the rest of it. I got my start writing book reviews for The Guardian, because back in the day, when there were freelance budgets for newspapers, there was lots of that work around. Newspapers were commissioning freelancers for features, for reviews, but anything that they really didn't have the time to do themselves. And of course, book reviews is one of them. And as luck would have it, I was speaking to one of the editors fairly early on. There was a sort of business supplement. I said, well, we want to do sort of book reviews, etc. So, if you have the time, we're looking for someone to read all this stuff and sort of review it for us. Of course, I said yes, because that was the first paying job, if you like, because I'd done little bits of unpaid work just to try and build a portfolio. But that was the first commission job. And I always say that, Tom Standage over on the Guardian, I think he's still with The Economist when he moved over. He kind of taught me how to write. He kind of taught me how to structure reviews, how to think about audience and all of that. So I'm always very grateful for Tom for taking the time to sort of teach me how to do that stuff. But I cut my teeth just doing that, just writing book reviews for The Guardian's business supplement.
Wow. And then what's been do you have a favorite project, a favorite content that you've delivered, something that you look back and go, that was the hardest thing I've ever written, but my God, I love it?
There's been a few reports over the years which have been sort of like pulling teeth. It depends on what it is. If it's I don't tend to do reports which are empirical research. If someone says, can you go and do the research for it? No, that's not me. I don't do the research. You come to me with all of the stuff already done, and then I basically knock together all this data, all this stuff that you've got into something intelligible for your audience. That's when I come to the table. There's been a few of those over the years for largish companies, and it's always nice when you get lots of feedback. So yeah, we understood what we were trying to achieve, and you helped us to get there, which is the whole idea of the business. It's about communication. I often get a lot of that. Either businesses say, we've got all this stuff and we want to create something out of it for our audience. Okay, can you help us to try and understand what all this means for our audience? Because that's the first conversation I always have with any client base is, let's not talk about the work yet. Who's your audience? Who am I writing for? I need to understand that in detail before I even type a word. And we have lots of conversations about that. Where often they haven't kind of thought that through yet. They're more focused on the end game, whatever it is, a report, an ebook, or whatever the end game is. But I say, well, let's have a conversation about the audience first. We really need to understand what motivates them, what are they interested in, why should they come to your business for this information, etc. And those are always interesting conversations, because then you get to understand who the business is, what their motivations are, who their audience is. And consequently, the content you create is better. It's more targeted to exactly what they want. And it's always nice when they say, "Yep, the material was fantastic. We couldn't have done that without your help." Lots of questions you asked us we hadn't even thought about. And it's ended up with maybe some lead gen, which has done very well for our business.
Amazing. And if you could go back to the beginning, when you first started your business, is there anything you would change?
I think early on, it was just maybe maybe throw the net a bit wider. I think I was guilty, just like every other starting freelancer. You know, people that come to me who are sort of newbies and go, "I want to do what you do. How do I start?" Every single one of them, of course, usually has one client, and they say, "Well, I've got a client, and I'm happy to do that." And I was exactly the same. I sort of worked for one client for years, but of course, that's not very stable. It's also you really need to when you're freelancing to sort of cast your net as wide as possible. That's what I should have done early on, was not focus on very specific areas of writing and also certain types of clients, but throw the net as wide as possible, because then you have a nice wide customer base, and if someone drops off, then your income is in the heat. And you can pick that up, and it gives you more stability, because obviously as a freelancer, your income environment is very, very unstable. Always is, always will be. There's things you can do, and I have done over the last couple of years to make that more stable. But early on, I really should have cast the net much, much wider, and try to sell to a wider type of businesses, not a focused sort of industry and sector, but right across the board. Really, that just literally throw as much stuff at the wall and then just see what sticks.
Apologies. Okay, fabulous. And if you were speaking to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you have?
There's lots of that. I think it was a case of be much more communicative than maybe you were. Again, one of the things I get time and time again from newbies who want some advice is they really do think this kind of job is ivory tower. That here I am, and the work will come to me, and it's all fantastic and wonderful, and then off we go for retirement in 40 years. And clearly that's not the case. It just is not the case. The big problem, and the big one that everyone seems to find as an obstacle, is the selling side. Because there's no bounds about it. What you're doing, you're selling you're selling your time, you're selling your knowledge. It's a sales exercise. So if you're not going to be interested in picking the phone up and talking to people, or having conversations with potential clients, then you're not going to be successful. I'm not naturally a very outgoing person. I guess that's why I gravitate towards this job. But you learn early on that you kind of have to be more outgoing, more communicative. You literally have to sort of pick the phone up and cold call people. You're almost like a cold call salesperson. That's what you are, because you're asking for work from someone that you've never met before. That's hard to begin with, but over time, the more, like most things, the more you do it, the easier it gets. But if you can crack that one, that you understand it's a sales exercise, the writing is almost a peripheral thing. Creating the work, it's the sales side. If you can understand that and get your head around how you're going to do that and package you as the service, then you'll do very well. But unfortunately, the opposite is also the case. That a lot of people can't get over that. I can't do that. I can't just cold call people and ask for work. Well, how is it going to arrive then, guys? It's not going to drop into your lap. It just won't. Maybe in a few years' time, when you're established, then people will come to you. Because that's where I've sort of found, when you're sort of starting off, you're pitching 80% of the time and writing 20. Whereas now I'm doing the opposite. I'm sort of pitching 20 and writing for 80, which is obviously where you want to be. But that's took 30 years, guys, to get there. It's not overnight. So you have to crack the sales side. That's the important thing. But I think if I could have accelerated that a little bit more early on, the business would have taken off a little bit quicker, in fact, a lot quicker. You have to crack the sales side. That's what I'd say, is just think about that. Even do some training, go and do some training if you feel you need to, just so you can crack the sales side.
Yeah, no, and what powerful advice. It's, if you're not writing, I guess it sums up, if you're not writing, you're selling, and if you're not selling, you're writing. Ultimately,
yeah. It's not ivory tower. It just isn't. And all of these freelance networking thing, you put a profile up there and people think, put the profile up and then work will arrive. Not really. That's not going to happen, because one, you have to bid for the work, and I have a very low opinion of a lot of these these networking so-called freelancing websites. which will get you work and it'll all be fantastic. I have a very low opinion of that, but that's another conversation. But you can't. There's no automated way of doing this. It's not just set yourself up, put a nice website together, and then the work arrives. That's just not the case.
No, I get it. Totally get it. Thank you. And hopefully that helps save time for some of our community. So my next question is more related to the people that you're working with and coming out of COVID and into the cost of living crisis. Has this affected the business? We've experienced it both ways of that?
Not really. The pandemic was pretty good for me. I didn't see a drop off at all. If anything, there was an uptick in work because businesses suddenly realized they had to keep the communications going. They were looking for services which they could just buy in remotely. And of course, I did all that. So it was really not really a drop off at all. In fact, it probably ticked up a little bit. I didn't see any kind of drop off there because I think businesses understood that they couldn't cut back on, I guess, all of the public relations stuff. They had to keep communicating. They said, look, we're still here, we're still alive. Our business is still viable, even though we're sort of under a cloud. They still needed all that communication to keep flowing. And of course, that's the kind of thing I tend to do. There weren't many big projects. I think the kind of money that they were spending maybe on larger communication projects, that kind of got shelved. But the general sort of day-to-day stuff that just continued. That wasn't. I didn't see a drop off in that at all. Now, post-pandemic, of course, businesses are trying to work out what that means. What is our post-pandemic business going to look like? What's our business landscape? How do we communicate with our customer base, whether that's B2B or whatever? That's my bag. B2C is interesting, how the relationships change with businesses and their customers, but I'm B2B. But even that's changed. Even businesses are trying to work out what's the new world order and how do we communicate that to our to our commercial partners. So that's an interesting one as we sort of move into the post-pandemic period. I can see a lot of different kinds of communication, focusing on experience and what that means for our businesses. How do you communicate that in the B2B space, that kind of thing? Or can we learn from B2C? So I'm seeing a lot of that, trying to work out what does that mean for our business and how does that translate into the communications. So I'm being asked a lot of stuff about strategy, oddly enough, not physical writing of anymore. It's more about, well, how should we structure this? Where should we put this material? How should we communicate this message? And how does that fit into our larger strategic plan? So that's an interesting one because then you end up helping businesses strategically, not just with communications.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's really powerful advice and insight into how, because you work with so many different businesses. So thank you so much. And then my last question, really, looking back on your journey, how would you sum it up?
It's been ups and downs, absolutely. It hasn't all been plain sailing, absolutely not. But I think the business just had its 35th year anniversary, according to LinkedIn. So it's stuck around, which is quite nice. What I always said years ago, decades ago, was that I would always do something in the writing space. Freelancing was always very attractive, but I never sort of took the physical push. I was not going to make the decision to say stop work and try this gig. It was kind of forced upon me by, like most people, because of redundancy. So there's a decision. What do I do? Do I just go back to work, get another job, or do I give this freelancing a go and see if it works? And that was 35 years ago. So it's clearly, it's worked, and there are ups and downs. Absolutely, it's more stable than it has been for years. Because I've changed a lot of my clients over to some retainers, and it's not just ad hoc work anymore, which is the bread and butter of most freelancers. So that's changed over. The model for income is slightly different now, so it's more stable, which is quite nice because you don't have the constant pitch all the time. Even though I still do that, I think even though you may be in a position where you don't need to do that, I think it's still good to keep pitching. Because it's a skill that you do need to keep practicing. It can get very stale if you feel you haven't pitched. So I'll still try and pitch something once a week to someone. Someone, usually I trip over a new business when I'm doing research for somebody else and say that'd be interesting. Maybe they need some communications, so you still pitch stuff even even decades into the business, because that's where the lifeblood comes from. Everybody I work for today, I probably won't be working for in 5 years. That's the kind of churn. Everyone I worked for 20 years ago, I don't work for anymore. But oddly enough, about every decade or thereabouts, an old client comes back. That's happened this week. A client from 10 years ago has come back onto the radar because they want some material, that kind of thing. Because you never quite know. I've left voicemails on people's phones as a pitch, and they've called me back a year later. So it's worth doing that. It really is worth leaving messages, making whatever contact it is, because they may not need you today, but they may need you, in my case, in a year's time, and they remember that. But it's all about just keeping connected. I feel understanding what your marketplace is, how it changes, updating your skills. Like for instance, a year ago, got into lots of audio and shed loads of podcasting because everyone wants a podcast, that kind of thing. So always update your skills, etc. Those are going quite. So businesses are trying to work out what their audio strategy looks like, because they can see that's going to be massive for them, and so on. It's always a case of keep your skill set alive, pay attention to what's happening. And just evolve your business forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much for all the tidbits and advice and guidance that you've given to our community.